Stephen Parkinson, thank you very much indeed for giving us your time when clearly you are under huge pressure at the moment. Rarely has the CPS ever faced such pressure, certainly not since 2011. How are you going to find capacity for dealing with the riots in terms of swift action and a vast multiplicity of charges potentially?
Well, we already have that capacity. We've deployed extra prosecutors really from the outset. Over the weekend we had dozens of additional prosecutors. I should say that the CPS has a 24-hour service, 365 days a year. So throughout the evening, one of our CPS areas, CPS Direct, is available to charge. To give an example, between 8 and 10 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday nights, we had 70 lawyers available, more capacity than we actually needed. We also had a surge team available to provide the extra support. During the daytime, prosecutors have been coming in. So we do have the capacity and the capability to deal with not only what we've already experienced, but even if it goes up a gear.
How are you finding this surge of prosecutors, though? The CPS lost 30% of prosecutors during the austerity years. Presumably you don't conjure them from nowhere. What knock-on effect does this have on the system?
Well, we did lose prosecutors, but actually over recent years we've built up that resource. The system is under enormous pressure. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I think really the message I want to give today, though, is that in circumstances such as these, which amount to a national emergency, all of us across the criminal justice system, we're working together, we're raising the level of performance, we're finding the resources to serve the public in the way that they would expect us to do.
National emergency, they are strong words coming from the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Well, I think the scenes that we've seen over the last few days do justify that description, and they justify the swift and robust action that all of us have been taking as a result.
You're relatively new in the post. What has gone through your mind as you've witnessed what's unfolded since the atrocity in Southport?
I can't imagine a crime as awful as the crime that took place last Monday. Absolutely devastating, obviously, for the families involved, for the victims, the children who witnessed that. I've never seen anything like that. I have the most enormous sympathy for those involved. Words cannot express my feelings around that. But as a legal professional, my responsibility is to bring those involved, not only in that event, but obviously subsequent events, to justice. What I want to do is ensure that charges are laid that give judges the ability to pass quite stringent sentences if that is what that conduct deserves.
Talk to me a bit about this process now that we have this surge of prosecutors advising the police on charges. Are we in a situation where we are bringing in effectively emergency powers for courts to act?
So we're not in the position yet that we need to ask for additional courts, night courts, extended sittings, weekend courts. But there is an additional protocol available which enables that to happen. At my instigation, we've set up a Gold Command group which brings together the police, the CPS, the court service, so that we can, at a national level and on an hourly basis if necessary, look at the situation and decide if we need extra capacity.
In terms of the speed of justice being meted out, there are risks involved with that, aren't there? When we know that for justice to be seen to be done fast has pitfalls in it. Just talk to me a bit about that and what confidence the public can have in a system at this point.
I think that's a really good point, if I may say so. I mean, for some offences such as violent disorder, it's possible to make immediate charging decisions on the basis of what the police have witnessed, charge them, bring them before the court overnight, as we have done, and then they're sent to the Crown Court immediately. I would be reluctant to make immediate charges because we want to get these cases home and to establish the common purpose. It's going to be meticulous police work involving looking at CCTVs, facial recognition technology, detailed analysis of the events, and so we can construct the strongest possible case.
Will it be the situation where unconvicted defendants are remanded, as happened in 2011? Will you keep people behind bars even though those cases haven't yet come to court?
That's happening already. Individuals are in custody at the moment. They've been sent to the Crown Court. They are remaining in custody. If there's a likelihood of committing further offences, if there's a threat to public safety, these individuals do need to be kept inside.
Can we expect longer sentencing, as we saw in 2011, do you think? Again, a matter for the judiciary, obviously, but is that something that you would anticipate?
I would anticipate this, yes. It is important to say that it's a matter for the judiciary, but the Sentencing Council has issued guidelines which judiciary are expected to follow. So for the sort of scenes of violent disorder that we have all been witnessing, the guidance for those most closely involved is around 2 to 4 years imprisonment. For riot, for similar behaviour, it's 4 to 7 years imprisonment for those right at the centre of this extreme violence.
Will some be charged under terrorism laws?
There is that potential, yes. We've all read overnight around far-right groups using online to publish details of solicitors involved in immigration offences. Deeply concerning, because these are people going about their own business, doing their jobs. If certain elements are in place, if behaviour of this kind is motivated by ideology or on political considerations, it's designed to intimidate the public, if there's an element of planning, then we would definitely consider terrorism-related offences, and those can result in even stiffer sentences.
I mean, the government's independent reviewer of terror legislation, Jonathan Hall, has warned against classing riots as terrorism for fears it could escalate the system. What would you say to that?
If we see those elements that are particular to terrorism, particular groups of people with particular ideologies, targeting particular groups of people, using extreme violence and so forth, then the terrorism definition is met. And
do you think you've seen, or your colleagues have seen that yet? What are you hearing?
The most serious examples of criminality will be met by the most serious charges. There's a very strong public interest in giving the courts the capability they need to pass harsh sentences.
Some of the most important players of this, of course, are actually online. How quickly are your lawyers being able to act against them?
If we know where they are and they're in the UK, then clearly arrests can be made. I know some individuals who are abroad, but what may not be fully understood is that the Crown Prosecution Service has lawyers around the globe, including in Europe, liaising closely with the local authorities, with police officers who are also stationed out there. So we can coordinate globally with our criminal justice partners, and arrests can be made and people can be returned. So there's nowhere to hide for people who are planning this sort of activity.
And has that happened yet?
It hasn't happened yet, but these are early days, work is underway.
Would Tommy Robinson presumably be on that list of those who might anticipate it?
I think Tommy Robinson should be very careful about the language that he's using, and he should be very worried about what he's said so far. But I'm not going to go into details of particular cases for reasons you understand.
Separate to Tommy Robinson, if we can find them online and if we know where they are, that's the crux of the issue. Whether it's state actors, whether it's others inciting anonymously, there is a whole tranche of seriously threatening actors with whom you can barely find traction, presumably through the activities of the CPS or the police.
There can be difficulties, that's absolutely right, but the police have considerable capability, including technological capability, to track people down. What I want to say is that the offences are there which enable us to prosecute these cases. Today we've actually brought a charge against someone who's used online activity to incite racial hatred. We expect many more cases such as that.
There is also presumably pressure on prosecutors to prosecute violent counter-protests with an even hand. How conscious are you of the real danger of the politicisation of the CPS when people step back and look at exactly who is being charged, in which protest and potentially in which counter-protest?
We are not part of the political arm of government. In fact, politicians cannot interfere with the decisions that I and we make. So we apply our job, independently and fairly. We were brought into being to prevent miscarriages of justice, and anyone who commits a criminal offence will be given the same treatment and the same approach.
Just to return to the question about the threats that have been issued online against immigration lawyers, immigration solicitors. You came to this job, your background was as solicitor. That must, for you personally, be especially chilling.
It is chilling. These are individuals, they're professionals, they're doing the job that they came into the law to do, and they should be able to go about their business without fear. Their names are known. I'm sure they will get additional protection from the police as a consequence of that. They need to be able to do their jobs. Fortunately, these days, lawyers, as COVID taught us, we can do our jobs from wherever. We don't need to go into the office. I imagine many of those individuals will carry on working from home or outside their offices. But obviously, the legal profession, they have my full support. I take very seriously, actually, attacks on professionals, emergency workers, anyone who's providing a public service. They're entitled to protection and the full force of the law behind them.
Do you think some of the political rhetoric in the last few years, specifically under the last government, around lefty immigration lawyers, has fed into some of this narrative?
I'm not going to sit here and blame politicians for the language that they use. Can I be absolutely clear? This is sheer criminality, thuggery, based on the flimsiest of excuses. The people in Southport do not want to be happening what has been happening. We've heard many of them speak out. So no, I'm not going to condemn politicians. People are responsible for their own behaviour on the streets these days. It's our job as law enforcers to make sure it's brought again to an end swiftly.
Can I also ask you about the naming of the suspect in the Southport case? Is it time now to name suspects earlier, even if they are underage, to ensure that disinformation cannot take a grip in the way that it clearly did last week?
I think it's really important that I make this point, Julie. He was identified on Thursday morning. This disorder has continued to spread. It hasn't made the slightest bit of difference. The disorder may have been prompted by those awful events in Southport, but it's taken on a life of its own.
When we're talking about deterrence, you clearly, as you've been describing, have had an immediate programme in place in terms of the CPS. The Prime Minister has talked at length about what he's put in place in terms of policing. It's not deterring these actors yet, is it?
It's not, but in my view it will soon. As soon as cases come before the courts for sentencing, then people will understand the harsh reality of what happens if you get involved in this sort of criminality. So it's not far off. The 2011 riots came to an end within days following the imposition of significant sentences, and that's my expectation as to what's going to happen here. But can I just give this assurance? We didn't start from nowhere last Monday. We have these plans in place, and so we've been able to activate them very quickly, but built obviously on lessons that we've learned from the past, including 2011.
But we should be in no doubt this is an extremely dangerous moment for the country. It's the worst surge in far-right activity we've seen since the early 1970s. What is your gut sense of that as you sit in this incredibly important role?
We're all clear as to what we must do. There's widespread recognition that the rule of law must triumph and justice must be done. And I do believe that our communities across the country, I spoke to the Chief Crown Prosecutor for Merseyside today, there's a strong community spirit in that area, people pulling together. That, I think, is the sense across the country, and I'm confident that the current disorder will come to an end soon.